connectography kind of talks about some of these sorts of ideas of like, yeah, like trade will hold us together, but it'll hold us together when we're individual too, not becoming larger conglomerated entities that, you know, intertrade. Like, well, this is why something like an EU makes sense, because these sorts of things become easier until the entity that, you know, all of the goop in between the cracks starts to get thicker and thicker. And what, like, the analogy of the goop is the entity that's taxing the ability to organize this sorts of trade to the degree where it's like, hey, if we could just leverage information and, you know, technology and whatever to be able to come to these sorts of agreements without this entity in the middle that's taking X percentage for facilitating ? You know,
yeah, I 100% agree with, and like it makes less and less sense for you to amass a larger and larger governance system, right? Like the federalist system that we have in the US, which has largely been discounted by people living on the coasts who say, look, we have all the population, therefore we should just do popular vote. We should do things as one giant mass of a country. And then you have people living out in the rural areas being like, whoa, we're growing the food. We're where the resources come from. You're extracting out this value. We want to have control over our lives. Otherwise, we're just serfs to you. And I think if you continue, if the coasts continue, and cities, it's not just the coast, it's also Chicago, it's probably St. Louis, it's these places where large groups of people keep trying to assert their authority over other people because they have a larger mob. I think you will start seeing more of what's going on in the state of Iowa, where they're going into Western Oregon counties and saying like, hey, you guys want to come join us in Greater Idaho? And I think you may see a breakup of things like that. Do you think the U.S. government will allow counties to leave the state that they're in and join a different state?
I have no conceptual framework for what my inclination would be no, because it seems like if I'm thinking on behalf of a complex entity that wants to maintain power and garner as many resources as it can, you know, the ability for smaller units of my conglomerate to make agreements that benefit each other without my approval doesn't seem to be in my best interests. You know what I mean? So my inclination would be to say is that no, they would in fact be like, no, states have drawn their lines. Like, I don't know, or maybe just like being that goop in the middle that facilitates, like, yeah, we can facilitate this, but it's gonna, I don't know if it's a financial cost or like a power. I don't know. My inclination would be is that they're going to, you know, play their role and make it a pain in the ass. But yeah.
I think those graphs that show, you know, there's this many people living in this one, you know, county in LA. And then you show some giant mass of states, like let's just say like Montana, Wyoming, and part of Utah. And it's like there's the same number of people live in this one little county as live in this giant area. Therefore, the people in this county should have as much power over the people living with this much space. And like this is like really, really polarizing logic. Right? Like the people that are living in the cities that want to say like, look, we have the votes and we've grown up with this philosophy that one person, one vote, everybody's equal. And so therefore any of this concept of the electoral college or the fact that you produce resources and we need resources has no bearing on things. We've agreed on the rules. Eventually people will get tired of it and try and exert their own freedom. Now, I don't know what happens out of that. But my guess is it cannot go on forever that the people in the cities keep exerting their will on the people living in the countryside.
Yeah, and that's where my mind, I guess, was just going as you're saying that, right? It was that idea of the rationalist versus the neoliberal there, and then there's this fallacy of, you know, all... and like, it's not a fallacy, like all men are created equal, but as soon as you're created, as you start to navigate your way through the world, like differentiations pop up, but that's like a different thread. This idea of like the broader geographical group, like let's play through a scenario where, you know, the 20 million people in LA have their own sovereign entity, and the 20 million people with the broader geographic group are their own sovereign entity. Then who's going to have the power, Vance? You know, it's like, it's going to be the ones with the resources that are filtering X percentage of like their land, their limited water, like their X and Y and Z, into this really small in group. And yeah.
Well, I mean, yes and no, because the flip side of this is that county in LA also has the port that moves more freight through it than any other port in the Western Hemisphere. So you can have all of the resources you want, but the reason those resources matter is not because you're going to consume them, but because you're planning to have somebody else buy them from you so that you can buy other goods that you want. And so that tension is not
well, so this is great because there's the realist power balance, right? Of like, all right, well, you've got what we need here, and all right, well, we've got what you need here, so let's just come to an agreement here. And
but I do think that right now most people view this through a lens that is way oversimplified. It is like one person, one vote, and we've amassed a group of people that believe the same things, they fly the same flags, and if you don't like it, doesn't matter, our mob is going to push you over. But people won't I don't want to say that. My conception is, or maybe my desire is, that people won't accept that. But coronavirus taught me that people will accept a lot more suffering and control by other people than I ever imagined. I was personally quite shocked at how willing people were to give over their freedoms. Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.